Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another installment of A Mile High and About to Die. I am your loyal, faithful, and wise host, Alex Blum, and
I'm just a regular guy trying to stay sober one day at a time. My name is Zach Blum, and I'm a co-host. I'll take co-status, not above or below. Don't want to get into that stuff, just regular.
Just a guy getting through it.
We're just all equals here.
Doing our best.
Everybody, just doing our best.
Yeah.
We learned some things running our lives into the ground, and we're here to talk about it because it might apply to all y'all out there in the middle and all y'all out there on the fringes.
How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm feeling great today, actually.
Yeah?
I feel like you're doing great today.
I'm doing well, I've kind of have a craving for strudel.
Oh, the strudel, yeah?
Cha.
Yeah, maybe after this we'll go get the strudel.
That sounds very nice.
Yeah, so get a room, huh? Fun boys? Yeah. Speaking
Heavy
of...
topic today.
Yeah.
Real heavy stuff. We got through that fourth step. That's really, now we're like into action in the program. We're not just like, oh my God, you're so great. What are we actually going to do about it,
Yeah. What are we going to do about it?
We're going to record a video.
Yes. Wait. Like this video or
This
like
is the
a
one.
different kind of weird video?
Well, okay.
We'll see what happens, yeah.
Follow our YouTube channel. So step 5, I think, is a really beautiful act of faith and movement, and really kind of, I think, cuts the kind of boys from the men, the girls from the women, and everything in between. Can you tell us what step 5 is and maybe what the associated principle is? And if not, I have it right there.
So step 5, it's admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. The principle behind the step that we're going to put into action is integrity. You're going to piggyback on me on that one?
Sure.
You just want to get in on my integrity?
Yeah.
There's enough for everybody.
It's like a fire, it just spreads.
Yes. So integrity, plus we're admitting things to God, to ourselves, and another human being. And we're not just admitting anything, we're admitting the exact nature of our wrongs. Well,
Right.
how does that relate to the steps previous to this?
Well, first we figured out what a higher power is. We figured out we were screwed. We figured out we need help from a higher power.
So we're screwed would be step 1.
Yes.
Okay, in an environment of honesty and acceptance, which are the step 1 principles, we figured out, the path we're on is fucked. The way
Yes.
me being in charge of my life, we're fucked. And then step 2,
We said maybe there's some way out of this with a higher power.
like going in search of a new path, and maybe it involves trying to figure out a new way of thinking and feeling and looking at the world.
I think that's right. And I believe the step principle there was honesty.
Of the second step?
Just kidding.
Close. It starts with an H, though.
Help.
Yes, it is.
Hope.
Hope is what you said, right?
Yeah.
We're experts, by the way.
I've heard this, they say like there's a hopeless dope fiend. I've heard a dopeless hope fiend.
Yeah, that's us now.
That's a shirt.
Yeah. No more dope for us. It's only hope now.
We need to get a website.
We do need to do
I
that.
gotta go.
Yeah. Oh, God. Go, Daddy.
So we figured out that there could be a higher power that could help us. Maybe we spend some time figuring out what that might look like, who that is. And then in the third step, we really made a decision to really trust in that thing and kind of step into like whatever comes after it, I'm going to just go forward and stop kind of waffling about, am I in, am I out? Is there a high power, is there not? God is everything or nothing. And so I'm going to go with everything. And then with that, we started in the fourth step where we made a list of, okay, here are the exact nature of our wrongs. Here are the things that are happening. We made an inventory across our fears, across our resentments, and across our sex inventory, and came up with this kind of narrative about what has happened and what our role in it really was.
And what principle was at play in the fourth step, Alex?
Courage, like the heart.
Oh, yes, like the heart. You had to feel it, and then you put the pen on the paper, and you write some shit, and it fucking hurts, huh?
I hear there's a new
Tabarnak.
Borat film coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, it's coming up. I'm psyched for that. Yeah, I'm like looking for Borat everywhere now. I'm like, is he here? Is he, am I being Borated right now?
He comes from the inside.
Is Ashton Kutcher in on this? Are we getting punked, or what's happening?
I don't know, but I'm going to
excited
keep
about all of
talking
it.
about this.
Right, yeah, let's stay on task.
Great. And now we're in the fifth step, which is basically, do you want to maybe break down kind of what this admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs? So for me, this raises some questions around, like, there's these three parties. There's God, there's me, and then there's another human being, what's the difference and importance of all those? Can't I just like say I'm really sorry to God and then be healed? Like what's the purpose of all these elements? And what does that really look like, the exact nature of our wrongs? Why can't I just feel bad and say I want to be better?
Yeah.
Answers.
Okay, well, I would say that probably if all harms that happen to humans tend to be in relationship. I mean, the idea is we're relational creatures, so whether it's somebody that we're in a relationship with that we have some kind of emotional trauma with, an emotional shock is an emotional trauma, or whether it's a passerby on the street that, you know, says something or smacks us or does something terrible to us. Well, now I have a relationship with passersby that may be tarnished now, and there's a lot of passersby, right? So we kind of tend to look at the world in a relational way. So if we're hurt in relationship, we can be healed in relationship. This is the idea of, you know, therapy. You know, in a therapeutic relationship, you can heal these old hurts. You can go into these old places where you're hurt. So the idea here is like, probably if you're not doing well, so it's isolation is the theme here. Like for me, when I was at my end of my well, probably for most of my life, I just didn't trust other people. I could trust other people who drank like me, but I wouldn't want to hang out with them sober, usually. You know?
Right, it's almost like I could trust they would be bad people, but it was predictable.
Right, exactly. And I wanted to be at the designated place and time where it was fun for all of us to get in on that. And then I'd want to go and pretend to do my successful life while I assumed that they went off and did like
their pretend successful life.
Their pretended successful life, exactly. Yeah, so the idea here is like, I'm bringing in another human being, okay? Now, at this point for me, when I was doing my fifth step, I still don't believe that there was a for sure God out there. But I wanted to change in the maximum way that I could possibly change, and I understood that that was tied to this God idea. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna be all in, I'm gonna like go full out, pretend that there is one. And so when we're saying admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, if you don't believe in God, don't worry about it. If it's not there, it's not there. But you're still admitting it to another human being, and the idea is, you know, the opposite of addiction here is connection. So that's something that you hear in the 12-step rooms all the time. The opposite of addiction is connection.
There's a TED Talk, too.
Yeah, probably.
So it's proven.
It's true now. If it's on TED Talks, it's real. Yeah. Yeah, so there's this relationship that we tend to have with like, so first of all, if you're listening to this right now and you don't have people close to you, this would be a great, you know, process for you to go to as a suggestion. It applies to people, you know, who don't have close connections with people. I know so many people like this, by the way, you know, and by the way, if you're afraid of getting close with someone, you can pay somebody money, called a therapist, and you can tell them all your dirty secrets, you know. If you're anything like me, you'd pay them and then you'd try to, you know, convince that you'd lie to them, you know, because you'd want to, you know, build up you'd want to go there to practice lying, you know, in a way that couldn't get back to you. So anyway, like it's like you pay your lawyer to do the dirty work. You pay this therapist to be the repository of all of your sins. Your shit. Yeah, exactly. So you can do this in therapy, but it takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. And the guys that kind of the forefathers of therapy itself kind of said like, they said like a supreme moral imperative, you know, work like this where you kind of define what is your highest value and can you start working towards that. And doing that with another human being who understands what your task is and that you're at some point going to need to sit down with them and go through your life autobiography and tell them like what happened to you and then what you feel about it. Like they say that that's a replacement for therapy. Eventually that's what Carl Jung said about therapy. And he of course was like one of the founding fathers of what is today's modern therapy.
So literally like when we were talking about like last step 4, you literally we talked through kind of these different ways of making a list, the different categories. And so in step 5, I'm wondering, I know the answer because I've already done it, but for you, I'm wondering, am I just reading this list off to another person? And then do I read it again to God and again to myself? Is it all at once? Is it filmed? Is it not filmed? How does that work?
So the idea is like, you're going to tell this story to another person, and if there is a God, that other person is going to be there, okay?
The God, because
the God thing.
He would be everywhere.
The whole thing that we're doing here is kind of like, okay, we're trying to change massively on the inside.
Yeah.
And, you know, there have been studies that have shown, like, if you introduce an idea of whatever you would perceive God to be, like, if you're talking through that at the same time, you tend to change as much as a person can in a positive direction. Okay, so I don't know how AA figured this out or how the 12 steps figured this out exactly. It sounded like it was all by happenstance, but it doesn't matter what you come in believing. The idea is you're going to say this to another person. You have a written inventory so that you can sit down and keep track as you go along of, okay, I'm going to read across this. So last episode we talked about writing this inventory, how to do that. So if you're looking on how to do that, please go back and watch episode 4. You can write an inventory. So I'm going to sit down and tell you, Alex, because you're going to be my closed mouth friend. You're a person who understands. I have to start looking at the narrative that I've had of my life, what my, what memories I have of my life and why I'm in such distress when I'm calling them up and when they're being called up just by living life. I'm being traumatized by my own past experiences. So I'm here to read these out to you and be like, yeah, look at all these assholes and what they've done to me and how it's affected me.
And what an asshole I am.
And yeah, well, we don't, I actually didn't do that with my sponsor. I left him off, but you want to sit.
I mean, you are an asshole reading it.
Correct. Yes. And as you're sitting down,
Assholes,
you're like
every direction.
Well, and you kind of get into that space to be like, okay, look, I'm going to do this stuff that's going to help me, amazingly. So I need to sit down and like, okay, I'm going to be a secret asshole and I'm just going to sit down with this one person. You don't go back to the person and be like, hey, you did this, 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 and this to me, the person on the inventory. You go to a stranger or a friend or a confidant or clergy or something like that. It's really great if you can just go through the steps with someone. You sit down with them and you start reading them this story. So you kind of try to spot patterns together.
And I guess the idea is if I'm reading you a story, that means I'm hearing it also and God is hearing it. So I don't have to do it 3 times. I want to be time efficient. I don't have to do it 3 times.
Correct.
Right?
Just the one time. And if there is a God, God would be listening. God would be listening in you. God would be listening to me. And if there were other microphones of God in the room, yes. And so just the one time.
Interesting. And so how does that relate to, what is integrity in your definition, and how does telling you some like shit I did in the past relate to integrity? Again, I know the answer, but
well, so integrity so the way I think about it is my path and my life with me in charge of it was disintegrating. It was disintegrative. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is a matter of looking at things because like the wholeness of Zach. Okay, it starts splintering off and fracturing from all of these little, I don't know what they are, but I'm doing an investigation in steps 1 through 4 to find out what it is that's feels like it's disintegrating. I feel like I'm fucking dying on the inside anytime I'm sober, and when I drink, it just dulls the pain of that. But it doesn't, So underneath, like the narrative underneath is like I'm falling apart. I'm disintegrating. So the idea here, I think, is you start working through the steps, and then step 4 is this thing that, like, it does, it really, the people that are really serious about change hang in there and do it, and the people that don't do it don't change, And so you sit in there and you write the stuff out, and you start facing the darkness, and then you sit down with another person and you tell them the whole truth about everything that's ever happened to you. You tell them every secret you've ever had. You were talking about this quote, I can't remember what it was, though, about secrets.
That we're only as sick as our secrets?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is this great, so it's this directive of like, do you want to stay sick? Like, how free do you want to be is another one.
Right, or it's kind of like, the best disinfectant is light or something like that. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Like, the idea is like, things can't really rot or mutate or get too out of whack if there's other people that are kind of putting some scope and some clarity or some boundaries on it, right? Like, if I have some murderous rage about something, but before I do the murder, I go, hey, Zach, I'm thinking of doing a murder. I might get some feedback that, like, maybe there are other solutions. Maybe, just pay my water bill.
Right. It may be connected to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It may be connected to everything.
Also, for me, integrity, like an integer, right? Integers are whole numbers in math. And this idea of wholeness or oneness is really the goal of what I'm trying to get to. And so I think there's kind of 2 elements for me. One is, when I lived a life of lies and deceit and kind of facade and surface and different relationships to different people, I had to show up as like different people to different places at different times and like manage who knew which things on which conditions, and never should they all meet, or this whole facade would be exposed in the house of cards would be discarded.
Right, and so what's the root system of that tree that's growing these strange branches and bearing this strange fruit?
Water.
Like what's the commonality here? And it's like and the commonality I think when we go into this is what are my patterns and what are the and a pattern you could call it a program. So where am I getting this programming? Which kind of lends itself to like, what are my underlying beliefs? What are my underlying beliefs that tell me subconsciously, like code in a computer program, oh, I have to be this person now because I'm sitting with this person who thinks that I'm,
right,
in this space, and I've never cussed in front of this person, so I'm not going to cuss. This person, all I do is cuss, so I'm gonna cuss all the time with them, and if they ever meet in the same space, I'm gonna have to fucking run and grab a drink.
Right. Yes. And then there's this other person I only eat custard with. It's a custard-based relationship.
That was great. Yeah, sorry.
You.
Yeah, I was surprised by the humor of that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I think also, like you were talking about all these kind of traumas lodged in us that are directing consciously or unconsciously, I think, the way that we're operating in different people. And it's almost like opening up these traumas and healing them releases some part of us that's been like lodged in there, kind of like the Horcruxes for Voldemort. Like he's split into all these different places.
You can't just say the name, bro. You don't say his name. Yeah.
He who shall not be named.
Thank you. We'll have to edit that out now. Yeah.
But the idea is that like if I can return back to those things and open up whatever is being held inside those traumas, I have a chance to bring myself back to one piece and overcome whatever workarounds. I've been living all these loopholes to avoid facing different things and just live my life as is.
Mm-hmm. So there's a false self at play here.
Many.
Yes, many false selves. And, we're trying to get to the heart of like, what is the stuff that we're trying to burn away here? What's getting in our way of being the real shit that we are? Because my experience was I tried to kill the good stuff. There was a big part of me that was like celebrating living wrong, and doing wrong. I didn't really. If you would have caught me back in the day drinking and been like, "Hey, what's your life like?" I would have been like, "It's fucking great.
Really?
I drink as much as I can, as often as I can. I set up my whole life in a way that I'd be able to do that. I would have sold it to you."
Yeah.
Right? But on the inside, like I was numb. The chemical cycle was 24 hours. I wasn't a morning drinker. I wasn't a daytime drinker, but I was getting drunk. Like if it wasn't 7 days a week, I'd have a bunch of weed on the days when I wasn't.
That herba derba shit.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was just trying to manage my emotions, and I was trying to get to good outcomes without bothering anybody else.
Right.
And ultimately, so where does that come from? Well, that one of the things that I found in doing my fifth step was this concept of so I'm just going to say it's the concept of self-pity. All right, so self-pity was my big thing. I believe that self-pity is the building block of depression. Right. So I was depressed deeply because I was feeling self-pity all of the time, and I would get caught for. Like once it came on me, it felt strangely familiar. It felt good because I felt like I deserved to get punished. So I'm like punishing myself in my head.
It makes a clear explanation for your conditions of your life.
That's like, how do you explain what the hell is going on with me? I'm a college educated guy, smart enough. I've been successful in these other ways, but what is going on with him? He's just not launching. He's hiding out. And
Right.
if you really looked at the whole narrative, I was drinking as often as I could, trying to numb this pain.
Yeah,
right?
it would almost, if the world was out to get me, that would be almost nice, because then no wonder it's such a fucking shitty life I have. The whole world's out to get me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing pretty well, considering.
Right.
If they're not, then really I need to make some changes.
Right.
And that sounds like I can't smoke weed as much.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I'm gonna have to be sober.
Ooh.
Well, and then I need to condition myself to experience good emotions while sober. And that's the hard part about getting sober and staying sober is like, we're going through these steps, ultimately trying to rewire ourselves into, we're going through this important part of this process that basically it's the same thing as therapy, right? But, I didn't have health insurance when I got sober, so therapy, I didn't understand if it was an option for me or not. I wasn't Googling it. My family had gone to 12-step programs. I was like, I'll go there. And I got the result. And I was totally mentally ill.
Totally. I believe that.
Totally.
There's some people I meet them.
Totes
like,
crazies.
I meet people that are sober. I'm like, I can't ever imagine you as a user of alcohol and drugs. That's not the case with you.
Pretty fringe
I
still.
can imagine it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what it is,
exactly.
too.
Well, I embrace it. Well, and shit, I have more healing to do, and that's one of the reasons we're here telling our stories. I mean, for me, I was coaching kids hockey, and I was like, oh, I can't like tell this story publicly. I didn't want people knowing. I had, these fantasies probably that like people from my past would hear this and be like, oh, what a joke Zach is, but it's like, I got a story that can save somebody's life possibly if somebody were to hear it. I've already had people reach out to me, which is crazy because if you want to get me to cry, like people have seen what we're doing here and they're reaching out and they're I've had a lot of those people from my network that otherwise probably wouldn't have reached out to somebody probably.
What
which
a
is a pretty cool
service
thing.
I've done for them, huh?
Well, honestly, yeah, like it feels so good, and that's what this whole thing is. It's like, look, I can go to the pharmacy down the street. I can go to the pharmacy called the liquor store. There's a guy who walks around the neighborhood who's got a pharmacy. I can call him.
You know Wayne?
yeah, Big Wayne or Little Wayne?
Both.
Yeah. That's Lil Wayne.
Okay. I think I must know Big Wayne then.
Yeah, it must be Big Wayne. Or I can, so I can go to these pharmacies, or I can learn
That pharmacy in the sky, baby.
well, or this pharmacy. Like, look, I can get rewired around altruistic lifestyle. And so that's kind of what I found here in doing this work was, when I started telling the truth to everybody in my fifth step, not everybody, but to my sponsor, to one person, I was like, I didn't know if he was going to like record it and go tell the police. Like, that's not what happens ever. But
Yeah. Well,
as I was telling him, he was like, some of the stuff he was giggling at, some of the stuff he was like, that I was giggling at, he was like, very like, wow, man, okay, I'm so sorry that happened to you, you
Right.
know? And so I'm in counseling classes, and one of the things we were studying in the last couple of weeks, was about this very concept of, you telling your story to somebody else. And because it's my right brain that has this it's into nonverbal cues.
this side.
It's my right brain.
Literally the right brain?
Literally the right brain, yeah.
Okay.
So my right brain, like right and left hemispheres, like, you've got I think it's the left side that creates the form, puts things into form and structure,
right side is the content.
and then the right side is the content or the emotional side.
Do you know I'm left-handed?
So you're just so that's probably why you're having. Yeah, so maybe if you just learn to be right-handed, bro. Maybe just
I heard that causes you to stutter.
Yeah, probably because your brain's going really fast. Okay, so we have left and right brain. Okay, and apparently when you put pen to paper and write out an inventory, you're using both sides of your brain together. You have this side that has these emotions and these memories that have never had, because a lot, the early memories that we have were pre-verbal. They didn't develop alongside language.
Wordies.
Yeah, so they're just these free, they're called implicit memories. So it's memories, like when you walk across a room, you don't think about it the whole time unless you're doing a meditation with it.
Or a
you're
catwalk.
just walking and you're thinking about something else. It's a program. It's part of your subconscious mind. And then explicit memories are like, remember that time that you peed
Touched
yourself
me.
in Little League, It's like, well, yeah, and even if you didn't, you can imagine yourself being in Little League and peeing yourself,
Yeah.
So anyway, the idea is that...
I pooped myself once in Little League.
Really?
Yes.
I did in second grade, and I had to sit at the back of class, the entire class, and
Really?
everybody was like, what is that smell? Yeah, it was rough. Yeah, anyway, but we digress. So...
I did it again.
So
Later.
I do it quarterly, so
Yeah.
it's a common occurrence at my house, especially post-drinking body. But okay, so
Well,
the
so what
idea
you're
that-
saying about the right and left hemisphere also, I think, touches in integrity, where I'm kind of connecting these unconnected parts of myself into a wholeness as well.
Correct. Yeah. So I think there's science now to explain what was happening, what people figured out by trial and error by doing these steps, 80, 90 years ago when this stuff first appeared. That they had found a formula that could keep people sober for a long term.
Yeah.
So when you're writing, it's important that you're not just talking about it, you're writing it out. Because apparently it makes the brain kind of come to grips with it. Okay, and then when you're speaking it out loud to someone, when you're telling somebody your story, you're going to have this experience telling it, and then you're going to have another right brain, that's listening to it, and you're going to be the nonverbal communication is going to be happening between you, and your right brain is going to be learning from their right brain because we're social creatures. And you might have a lot more empathy than me with this little story that's never been told out loud is going to have. I'm going to be like, you're dirty and you shouldn't have done that because it's still this little kid brain.
A little boy.
I'm a little boy and I did this and I played with my pee-pee and, and I'm shameful about it. And then when I say it out loud to you, you can be like, oh man, I've totally been there.
Yeah.
Or, man, like, I feel for you, And so anyway, we start to get reprogrammed in real time because these memories aren't in the past. They're with us right now in the present moment. And the memory may not change. The fact of the memory may not change. But the emotion that is connected and wired to that memory, maybe it was shame before, it gets rewired into something else now. So it stops being, a caustic force in my life, a toxic thing happening.
It's kind of like airing this thing out where it's like I have this like dark secret, like, I did this bad thing when I was young and I've never told anybody and it's so full of pressure, and then I tell you and you're just like, like fuck you. Or it's really no big deal. And then I have this chance where I can, I have the same thing, but like suddenly, actually this thing that's I've carried for so long, this guy is, it's like whatever, and that kind of, I think, juxtaposition of emotion and other outcomes for it is some of what you're talking about. Totally. I really like how all this kind of, you're kind of explaining in this way where there's this spiritual element of like, I'm admitting things to God, I'm like trusting in a higher power, and there's a very practical, psychosocial thing going on where I share information, it gets reprogrammed in my brain, and I can walk away, with less emotional weight attached to it. And I think that's cool. A lot of the program is happening on these multiple levels at once, Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Thank you.
So,
What do we got?
Okay, so we're going across. So when we're literally sitting next to each other and we're telling this story.
Literally.
Yeah. So when we're going through the fourth step and we're going across the column, telling someone, okay, Joe is in that first column. In that second column, it's
Joe Mama.
Yeah, we were talking about the kids that I played hockey with that didn't want to be my best friend.
Joe.
Yeah. So maybe Joe, didn't want to be my best friend on the hockey team. Maybe he made fun of me. Maybe he, when we were around a girl, he would say like,
a small wee-wee.
He's got a small dick. You
Right.
You don't want to talk to him.
Right.
And so I'm gonna write all those things down, and then every time I think of them, I might say like, it makes me feel.
Your pride is hurt.
Yeah, my pride is hurt. Maybe it makes me think that my dick is small. Every time I think about this kid, or anytime I'm around, a hockey rink, or that one, King Supers we went to as a team one time. Who knows what it is. So,
but how is it?
I'm married, so
serviceable.
It's serviceable, absolutely.
Katie's
We're just
doing God's
bearing
work.
all here, everybody. Yeah, yeah, but we'll just keep it.
Okay,
yeah, it's a mystery.
So you find how it affected you across those different parameters.
Correct.
Self-esteem, pride.
Exactly. You go to that third column: self-esteem, pride, ambition, security, personal relationships, sex relationships, and pocketbook. Okay, now just those things that I laid out there, which of those would you think, would be affected? Hurt,
All
threatened,
of
or
them.
interfered with? Yeah, all of them probably. I can make arguments for all of those.
Yeah.
And there's some part of me that is probably making arguments and is stuck back at this time, waving this flag of morality, being like, we've been wronged. And now, am I supposed to believe this? So it's affecting my worldview. It's affecting my belief system. It's affecting how I feel about myself. What I think the world thinks about me.
Well, it's also, it also strikes me that in each of those future moments when there's opportunity for new connection, new relationships, that whole space is filled up with all this past emotion and fear, and I can't actually be present to creating something new with somebody because I bring with it so much.
Totally, exactly. Okay, so we're kind of starting to see, as you mentioned last episode, this third column is where we left off in the fourth step. Ooh. There's one more column after it over here that's called my part, okay?
Surprise column.
Yeah, my part. And we're kind of moving, you can kind of see, like, we just read them the riot act, and then we started to see that, well, everybody's affecting me in all of these ways probably. Like the littlest things and the biggest things are all affecting me completely. And then, so we're starting to see, okay, maybe I'm being sensitive, or maybe all humans are sensitive, and I just want to, how do I break myself off of this fucking Joe from 17 years ago?
Yeah.
So then we get to my part. So if we're going to be complete, we're going to switch the roles. We're going to take Joe out of it, and we're going to say, okay, what's Zach's part? And so Alex, in this situation, and hearing my fifth step, I would be reading it to him, and I'd just say, okay, so Joe did all these things to me.
Right.
Okay, is there anything else? Alex might say. I don't think so.
Zach, is
Yes.
there anything else I might say? Is there anything else you would say contributed to Joe pointing out your little pee-pee?
Yeah, okay, so it wasn't the pee-pee thing, but I remember I could feel something there, and if I had to put it into words, it's, okay, I'm going to write it down now. Yeah, he said something about my mom once, and I forgot about that, but I could feel the weight of something, and that's why the left and right brain need to work together here. It's fucking science, yo. So I'm going to write that in. Okay, is there anything else? No, I think that's it. Okay. So the third column, so you would say, well, how does that affect you?
Well, how does it affect you?
Can I tell you? And I'd tell him all those, 7 ways. Of those 7 ways, which ones did it affect me?
And what was your part in it?
Oh, what was my part? Okay, so at this point, freeze frame. We're going to actually we're going to stop everything, and we're going to cut out Joe from the picture. Now, everything else in this picture, what of it is mine in this relationship? If just Joe is missing now, and it's me and everything else in this picture, what of this relation, and it's our whole relationship in this picture. What here is mine to claim? And the general ideas that we're going to work off of, you can move again. Yeah. Boop. The general idea that we're going to work off here is, I'm going to be looking specifically through the lens of where am I being selfish? Where am I being self-centered? Where am I being dishonest? And where am I being afraid? So where are these things coming into it? So these emotions and behaviors I can start to sense are going to be, I'm looking for those specifically because that's going to help direct me to what my part really is in this, okay? So now there's more things that you can get into with that, and we will go way deeper and way harder on that with the 6th step next week. The 6th step is really concerned with this last column. We're going to be trying to find patterns and really what are the forms of self that you're getting into, or that I'm getting into? Because it's not about, for me, it's about me finding out for me.
I think it's great news that I had some part to play in it, right? Because otherwise it really is the world's out to get me, right? But if it's because I'm an asshole, then I have a way to solve things by not being an asshole.
Right.
Hard for me, but there's a path,
Yeah, it is. So it's hard for you.
It's a hard asshole.
Yes, it's like a crusty bagel. So the idea here is that, we're trying to.
That was glad we covered the crusty bagel line.
Yep,
so
it was. You
move through
check
the
that
slides.
one off.
Yeah.
Check that bagel. Take the old leather bagel. Oi, oi. So the idea here is most of the time when I'm running around telling people what my resentments are, and trying to change, trying to get them to be an ally of whatever my resentment is, I'm probably only talking about the first 3 columns, and I'm never getting to the 4th column.
And it's funny how me complaining about someone never seems to solve the problem. And it's almost like all this complaining or this feeling is this begging question of what do I need to change? But if I am not willing to ever look at that part, then I just have to keep asking the question over and over and over,
Exactly.
Are there any I don't know, maybe 3 prayers we could say?
Whoa, okay. Yes, there are. How did you know that? Have you been through this before? Yeah, okay. So the idea here is, okay, now we have Joe.
My name's Alex, you know that, right?
I can't read the bottom of the screen, okay? It's real life right now. So, okay, so we have this guy, Joe. We've just talked about him. Now, so I will say, it feels good to just write it out. My brain is oh, thank God I can put that down. It's been in my inventory. I've had to be lugging this shit around forever.
And Joe's a big man.
Joe's a big guy, yeah. He's almost as big as Big Wayne. So we're writing across this line so that we can kind of put a pin in it, okay? We've written out everything that we can possibly see, in our, and I might go a little harder on, for me, I really kind of wanted to, in that 4th column, I would talk more about I was feeling, there was selfishness involved because, hey, maybe with Joe, maybe I talked shit about him behind his back because, maybe I created this problem when I could have just gone and maybe I could have found a different way to be friends with him or make a working relationship with him or something.
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I don't need to let what somebody else says about, my genitalia or my mother, like, affect the truth about those things that I know.
Right.
Because I'm
or maybe if I had a healthy relationship with my mother, I wouldn't be so concerned about Joe's opinion.
Well, that's a good point too. Like, if they're saying something that's hurtful, well, maybe it's hurtful because I need to do some work on something. So
And
maybe it's actually
nothing to do with Joe.
It's got nothing to do with Joe. And if anything, like, it's almost doing me a service to know, oh, if he said something and I'm reacting about my mom, maybe I need to go look at that, and be like, what's up with me and my mom? What do I want there? And what am I not, So it actually is more like, let's get objective about this and just see where we're, kind of being sick. So where am I being selfish? Where am I being self-centered and trying to put things into motion to serve me? Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think this is, again, this like reprogramming from taking like all these other people have this power and effect on me to saying, no, I am the one creating these conditions, which again is good news if I want to change the conditions.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, it's like taking responsibility.
But then like, what if I'm, I understand all this, whatever, on paper, I wrote it out, Joe didn't do it, I do have a small PP, and he just noticed it, right? And so then it embarrassed me. It's serviceable. And so,
Yeah.
how do I, like, but I'm still annoyed with Joe, right?
Yeah.
I just don't want that anymore. What do I do? Get it out.
Yeah, so you want to go real hard on that part where you're like, where you can actually feel that you did have a part to play in this. And maybe it's just that maybe somebody like came up to you 25 years ago and punched you in the mouth at the Rockies game, at the baseball game. And now, though you love baseball, you'll never go back to the baseball field. And like every time somebody asks you, like a single tear rolls down your cheek and you're like, won't be going back there anytime soon. So who's the one that's really doing this to you at this point? Is it this guy still punching you in the face, or is it just you that might be hanging on to it? And it's real delicate here because we also get into, I don't want to tread too much here in the place where people might have trauma, like real trauma. They really got hurt. They really got messed with as a younger person or whatever.
And I think it's important to separate like that things happened and then there's ongoing reactions that maybe aren't servicing that myself any longer, and that those are two separate things.
Exactly. Yeah. So my memory of this thing.
So like you could definitely get punched in the face at the Rockies game.
Yeah.
But like doesn't mean you're avoiding Rockies games for the rest of your life is your decision, right?
Correct. Exactly. So that's the idea that like I do have a part to play here, and that's where a lot of people experience healing in some of these things is when they can confront that. Maybe this person came and did some objective, like evil type shit to you.
And well, go ahead.
But if I'm letting it, keep me at living at 50% for the rest of my life, like that's not fair to me. And that's not fair to all the people in my life either. And so it's like, that's your cross to bear. You want to shoulder that and be like, okay, I guess I'm just I want to live 100%, and I'm willing to do anything to get there. And that's where, I would never tell anybody directly this, but, for me personally,
I feel like you're about to indirectly tell people.
Well, I actually feel like it doesn't. It's gut wrenching, Like we're talking about forgiveness of motherfuckers that don't want it, that don't ask for it, that aren't deserving of it,
and won't appreciate it,
and don't give a fuck, and they're off doing whatever they're doing, and maybe they're dead, and maybe they're alive. But what we're talking about is I'm the collateral damage, and I'm an emotional
right.
I can't get out of my own way. So what do I do? How do I get past this? Whether it's Joe who didn't like me in my hockey team, or the person who, kind of destroyed my life, because they were in extreme selfishness at some point in their life. What do I do now? And so it starts with taking a look at it for the first time, confronting, do I have a part in this? And I would advise, if you have had serious trauma, sexual trauma, abuse, I would advise getting into a group around that and certainly being in therapy for those things. There's so much that there's such a bigger life that you could be living. You don't have to be, living the same way that you've been living. There's so many people that are out there that have experienced those things, and they've gone on. I mean, I know there's a lot of these people show up in 12-step rooms, and they end up medicating and trying to get through life in this other way, this banged up way. They never get to heal, and so these people they're incredible. They're incredible. And the 12 steps is a way that you can look at these things and kind of have an honest accounting and make a decision and be like, okay, I'm not going to fucking feel this way anymore. Not for one more fucking day in my life am I going to let this person who harmed me back then continue to take from me. Because at this point, maybe it's that I'm allowing it to happen and I'm not going to allow it to happen anymore. So that's a scary subject to talk about, but it's honestly like when you can start to flip the script on these things, and it can change how you can reprogram yourself from hating and the toxicity that creates in you. And you can do some simple stuff. It's not so simple. It's hard. It's crazy difficult, but it's simple enough. And you mentioned it.
I've heard about like resentment or this kind of hatred and like drinking as a consequence of it. It's like hating somebody else so much that you drink the poison yourself to kill them.
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
I love
because
that.
they're over there.
Yeah. And that used to be my whole life. So I was deeply resentful, deeply hateful, deeply manipulative. I mean, I was a really, really sick person. When I started to have a spiritual experience, it was in the fifth step.
Yeah.
When I was advised by my sponsor to start praying for the people that were in my fifth step that I hated, to be honest. That I thought they had harmed me, and I showed up to like tell my sponsor how all these people had harmed me.
Right.
And what I came away from it was like, oh, I had a little part to play, at least a little part in every single one of those things. Maybe I stepped on their toes and they retaliated, or maybe I've just been dragging this, hurting myself in my life because I've never let this go.
Right.
And he goes, okay, well, Zach, at some point, a couple weeks into it, he was like, have you, so how are the prayers going for the people in your fourth step? And I was like, oh, good one. Because something's listening, right? I get it.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, seriously, like there's these prayers for, as you go through your step work.
For these motherfuckers.
Yeah, for these motherfuckers. And I was like, what are you talking about? So he pointed it out to me.
It's interesting reframing, right? Because it's like, if I'm the victim of something, what power do I have to tell the person it's okay? Like I'm being destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. But if I have some ability to say, actually, I forgive you, Joe, then like apparently Joe doesn't have that much power over me anymore,
Exactly.
And it's also, I find like if I'm living a new way that's full of integrity, courage, truth, hope, all these things, I feel and act like a different person. And so I can also help to psychologically separate myself from this concept of this person I was in the past that these things happen to, that's defined and shaped by them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and it's love your enemies. And we've heard that before. I think it's from that book. That main character was saying it.
Yeah.
So I think it was important.
Isn't that Emmett Fox? The Emmett Fox Daily Reader? What's that book called?
Around the Year with Emmett Fox.
Yeah. That's today. The thing is love thy enemies. Yeah.
I didn't read. I read it at night actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So me and Alex are reading the same.
Spoiler.
Yeah, we're reading the same book.
Yeah.
It's a daily reader. It's called Around the Year with Emmett Fox. It's awesome. We'll have it in the liner notes. But so it's this idea that doesn't matter if there's a God, doesn't matter if there's anything listening. What matters is there's a method that humans figured out a long time ago. This is probably why religions were built. Once you try it, it ends up fucking working. It's crazy. So maybe that's why religions were created, because there is a power that happens when you start praying. So the thing and it's a specific kind of prayer. It's not just like, oh, help me make $1 million today.
Yeah, it's $1 billion.
Right. See, I'm not thinking big enough.
Okay.
So without further ado.
Yes, Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. Exactly. Yeah. So there's an anger prayer. Okay. The anger prayer, whenever you're feeling anger, is, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. So the shorthand that I use for this one is, save me from anger. God save me from being angry. So even if I'm like, once I'm starting to feel that surge of anger, it's like, I want to go fucking punch somebody. I feel so powerful right now. But I know I'm going to feel like shit in about 5 minutes if I take some kind of crazy action, if I act on this.
Okay.
And it's a crazy amount of energy because it's built to help me survive when something is fighting me or chasing me, right? So it's this amazing energy, but if I keep feeling it for a long time, it's gonna fucking kill me early.
Right.
So I need to be saved from anger, is I think what that means. And then thy will be done is always like, whatever you think and want, whatever you want me to feel, up to you. Up to you. Please just let that happen. And I also like this idea of like, this is a sick man. And it's, or like, I too have been a sick man. I've also seen it that way, So I've been sick before. This is a sick person. It's not a bad person. It's not my enemy. Maybe they're just sick. Maybe they're just having a rough life, How can I be helpful to them? God save me for being angry. So it's like I'm talking to something outside of myself, and my brain seems to respond to that in a good way. I wanted to have a different experience. Can I be helpful to this person instead of playing defense or playing offense? So that's kind of the anger prayer.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the next one.
Yeah, how about the fear prayer?
'Tis the fear prayer, which says, God, remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be.
What does that mean?
I think that it means, basically there's this core part of us which is good, and that these fears and various other reactions to dangerous or difficult situations are in between us and the truth. And so it's asking, remove this confusing layer, this confusing lens, let me get back to the truth, which is love, And so help me to refocus, re-see this. And I don't know. It reminds me, I've heard that something like that the, healing is a process of subtraction. It's I don't need to add, I don't need to really change. I just need to move the stuff off of me that's been in my way or that I've carried around. So for me to run faster, if I'm carrying an anchor, I don't really have to work my legs out. I need to let go of the anchor. I need to drop the rock.
Oh, you could say, drop the rock. That's an AA book. Yeah.
See you later.
6-step. So the fear prayer you would do when you were feeling fear?
Horny.
That does make me afraid. So maybe I do the fear prayer when you're feeling horny. Another point on this, the next line is after the fear prayer is, at once we commence to outgrow fear. So there's something about asking something bigger than me to remove this object that's in my way. It doesn't feel good. And direct my attention to what you would have me be. So maybe I have a new identity that I'm asking. My creator is, giving me, hey, this is your role. I want you to try and be the best version of yourself. And then for some reason, around that reorientation, I can outgrow fear. So maybe it's an immature thing. Maybe it's a childish emotion. So anytime I'm in it, there's probably something that I need to outgrow. There might be something in my life that I can't see because I just feel this fear.
Gotcha.
What about the ideals prayer? It actually comes from the sex inventory. Sex!
Cool.
But it actually works for anything. It's like a coverall, basically.
We ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. We ask God that what we should do about each specific matter. So I guess it's, to me, it's like having some kind of contact with a higher power so that when I think about what the best possible life is, the idea I come up with isn't like drugs and hookers, but is something actually aligned with love and positive values. And I need some contact or familiarity to know those things exist, to be able to shape some kind of ideal around them. And then it's, keeping those things on top of mind so I know how to move towards them and kind of making those things my North Star. Mm-hmm. When all these other things are more immediate, maybe more clearly defined, more concrete, it's much easier to pursue this as a bottle of alcohol than it is, love. Where's that,
Yeah.
And so it's kind of helping me to remember what my aims are, help to find them well, and then keep trucking.
Yeah, just trucking along. So the ideals prayer is kind of tied to the sex inventory. We're talking mostly about resentment so far. We do have a fear inventory and we do have a sex inventory that we've also written. And the idea here is the ideals prayer is kind of like to say every other area of our life, including sex, where we might have been chronically, feeling like we're missing the mark. What is the mark? What is the thing that we were shooting at in the first place? And then can we have a relationship with moving towards that? It's similarly with fear. I'll just touch on it. The fear inventory is really about to see where just me doing it on my own usually fails me. I used to use fear to get into action. I'd focus on it and I'd let it build up until I was so afraid that I'd actually take forward movement in my life, or I would beat myself up so much in self-pity that I was so enraged at the end of it, the anger started to come out, that I would get into action and I'd go do angry things, So I was having trouble moving forward in my life, okay? So and it's good to say, like, probably the reason that these are natural parts of us. These are natural drives that are, God-given drives. Anger, fear, and sex. They're all these natural things. And so the idea is like, if they're stepping in and leading, if I'm getting, super angry over traffic, if I do a prayer, the anger will go away. It doesn't I don't stuff it. It goes away. It gets redirected into something else. If I have fear, again, I can ask it to be removed, and then I have this new experience. So I've experienced joy in replacement of anger. I've experienced, love and happiness and meaning about things when fear is removed. And it's so funny, like, whether there's a God or not, you say these prayers, I didn't believe them when I was starting to do them, but the fear would go away. Sometimes I'd have to do it 3 or 4 times, but then the fear would go away and it wouldn't come back and, for a few hours sometimes. And some of this stuff was really scary. I had a really rough life for the first couple, year of sobriety or so. I had a lot of wreckage, a lot of stuff that I had to, the step work was scary, So I needed another way to manage those emotions and turn them into positive emotions, and kind of rewire, So I will say there is what are your thoughts on this, Alex? You see where I'm going?
Yeah. Well, I think that I don't see where you're going. First of all, not sure where he's going.
He's got that crazy look in his eye.
What I do think about is that I kind of think of it like, I'm holding a cup, right? And this is what's on my mind or the energy or life that I'm in. And if it's full up with anger, then there's no space for joy or love or anything positive because the cup is full. And so I see these prayers as kind of a way to clear that stuff out or to say, actually, I'm going to pour joy in here. And when there's joy in there, there's no space for anger. You can't be joyful and murderously angry at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so, or they say you can't be grateful and, angry grateful and whatever, depressed at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so if I can stay in those spaces, just by fact of the way I operate, I can't be in this negative space at the same time. And so I see these as sort of tools to reframe or return back to those other states that are available to me. And I think, I know you're going back saying, oh, maybe whether or not God is real or not, to me, it's also a process of defining what that God thing is real. What's definitely real is I can be in a state of joy. And to me, that state is a expression of a higher power. It doesn't have to be some guy in the sky who grants me the joy. If I can be in that state, that seems like a higher power than the way I want to operate. And so it doesn't have to be outside of that for me,
Mm-hmm. I love it. So
where are we going?
Okay, so we're going to put
that's a lot of words.
Well,
man.
we're going to put a quote up for you guys who
Okay.
are watching online. If you're listening, we're just going to read it for you here. So this is what I like to call. Well, it started off as the best friend prayer. Okay, that's how I like to call it. It's on page 552 in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It's in one of the stories at the back of the book. There's personal accounts at the back. Don't worry about reading that whole book. It's it's very large if you're new and you're thinking about doing this stuff.
What's the reading, Zach?
The reading is, if you have resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or thing that you resent, you will be free.
If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free.
Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free.
Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway.
Do it every day for 2 weeks, and you will find you have come to mean it and to want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassionate understanding and love.
It worked for me then, and it has worked for me many times since, and it'll work for me every time I'm willing to work it.
Sometimes I have to ask first for the willingness, but it always comes. And because... it's you.
Treading on my lines here. And because it works for me, it will work for all of us.
As another great man says, The only real freedom a human being can ever know is doing what you ought to do because you want to do it. Hey, that's a high five. Ooh, no look for him too.
Crispy.
So that's the best friend prayer, all right? Now I have found that to be true. It's prescribing for 2 weeks. Instead of prescribing antidepressants for the rest of your life or, you have to go work out angry every morning for, do CrossFit or whatever. I'm not ragging on the CrossFit people.
Great thighs.
Yeah, good job. Way to talk about it.
You can just say this prayer.
Yeah, so you just say this prayer for 2 weeks, okay? And so I had some weird experiences around it. And the first person that I had probably, kind of a rough thing going on in my life with was a friend of mine. And that was the first person, like when my sponsor said, oh, you should be praying for I would suggest that you pray for these people and see what happens. And I was like, okay, sure, see you there. And I was waking up super early in the morning at that time, and at like 4 in to go to work. And I would wake up and I would just start praying for this person. But instead of them being my best friend, I was so angry at them. I was like, bless this fucking guy,
This fucking
this
guy.
Motherfucker. I was like, this motherfucker, God, will you please bless him? And I didn't even think that there was a God listening. I just was saying God to, to whatever that thing was. Please bless this motherfucker. Bless him in his life. Bless him in his career. Bless him with money. Bless him with his family. Bless him with his relationships.
Yeah.
Bless him with his physical health, his mental health, his spiritual health. Just help him to know love and help him to know truth and goodness and help him to have really good people around him in his life. And all of a sudden, I got on this fucking
blessing train.
Blessing train, baby. And I can feel it right now. I get goosebumps when I talk like that,
yeah.
Whether or not there's a fucking God listening, okay? And all of a sudden, I started crying. and then I was like, okay, and I rolled out of bed. I did my 3rd step prayer on my knees, which I was doing at the time. And then I went and just did my day, and I felt better than I had ever felt in my entire life. And all of this shit that was all locked up in here, all of this fear and anger and all this stuff that I had stuffed down in here, it was like it sprang open and lifted. and I just felt this lightness. And I kept doing that because I was like, once I had that experience, I was like, it was better than alcohol. I was like, I want to fucking do this all the time. I want to be hyper sober. I want no fucking stuff in my experience that's gonna take me away from being able to feel the most of that emotion. And I found, after a couple days, whenever I even thought about this person, this guy was like, I just felt good because I was like, well, I'm praying for this guy. And the craziest thing was, I hadn't seen this guy for about 2 years. And I happened to be in some weird part of town. And I was meeting somebody for coffee. And I went into the coffee shop and that dude was sitting right there. And when I saw him, it was like my best friend, like my long lost, greatest friend ever was right there. And I was like, hey, how you doing? He was like, whoa. Because in his head, he was like, yeah, haven't you been really weird to me, And so it was very strange. And actually, you hear stories like that. Like once I started, praying for this person, I happened to see them, or whatever. And so it was crazy. So it changed me on the inside. And we're talking about, okay, now we're guys that were running our lives in the ground. We had to change that big on the inside if we were going to survive. But for you at home, I know so many people who are so wonderful and they don't have those extreme problems, but they don't have the extreme good stuff happening because they're not willing to change because they're not in that much pain. And that's why this is an invitation to everybody to get in on this thing. And whether you have ever tried this shit or not, whether there's anything fucking real listening, it doesn't matter. What I found was when I tried it, I got crazy effects. Crazy effects.
Okay, we got to start wrapping this up here.
Yeah, we're going a little long.
There's promises. So kind of the effects you're talking about, there's actually specific things that the big book says will come as a result of moving through these steps.
Pointers to kind of be like, you're on the right path.
Yeah, and I always love the promises because especially early on, I was like, oh, my life's not, if I do this stuff, there's actually some things I might get. And so why don't we just quickly run through them? I'll just read it. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. So look for delight. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now I begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly, and we will feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. That's on page 75. So to me, that's like, especially when was in a very low place, like I was like, sign me up for that. Like I could actually look at people, like I'm gonna feel at peace by myself. Like that seemed, like the whole world, seemed amazing.
Yeah, and it might sound kind of crazy, but it works, if you work it, so they say. You don't have to be a crazy addict or alcoholic to have it work for you. So, call to action for this week. I'm going to take this one.
The call to action.
The call to action. Pray for a motherfucker. Pray for a motherfucker. All right? Like, there may be somebody jumping to mind right now that if you were like, well, who do I hate? And probably you're going to be like, well, I don't hate anybody. I'm a good person. And good people don't hate people. If you're anything like I used to be. Hopefully you're healthier than that.
You sounded terrible in the past.
Terrible. Past Zach was pretty terrible. Good-hearted guy, but terrible everything else.
So pray for that person and free yourself.
Pray for that motherfucker and see what happens.
For 2 weeks.
And call him a motherfucker. Like, if the idea of this God supposedly that exists, like, if it is all loving and all like wonderful and powerful, who gives a fuck what you say to it? You notice how I'm like upping the language right now. That's how I do it, and I get these crazy, and yeah, I might be a fringe personality, but, I pray for people.
You're like the Alex Jones of sobriety.
Oh, and yeah, it's always, there's something here, they're listening in right now, and yeah, something is listening to you, but it's not God. No, so pray for that motherfucker. Person. Pray for that motherfucker, and use whatever language you want and you're comfortable with.
You don't have to curse.
Wish all the good things to them as though they were your best friend. And maybe you might even have an experience where you might find that maybe they are kind of like your best friend because they're showing you a place in you that is dark and painful. And maybe it takes somebody to have this kind of thing go on with them so that, so that they could actually touch you in a way that really hurts so that you can know how it is to feel hurt. And to have that experience. And so maybe they're doing you a huge service by showing you this wound so that you can now attempt to heal it. And instead of like having all this shit go on with, let's just stuff it, all these people that I don't like anymore, when you start doing this, you never think about them again. And if you do, you feel good about it when you do. That's a pretty good system. That's getting everything up and out. And if it ever comes back, it feels good. I like that system.
I like that. It's like an enema.
Oh, but
a coffee enema.
But like a transfusion enema.
I've never done it.
Me neither.
Gotta go get mine.
That's what we're gonna do now.
Say thank you to the people we say thank you to.
Thank you so much to Tyler Duffus at Blackwater Audio. We love you.
The Duff man.
Duff. And a request for the music. We love you. Oh, and by the way, Caleb Bond at 38 State for our beautiful artwork here. 38 State. Check it out on Instagram.
All right. Until next week, it's a mile high and about to die.
And
more?
And next week, it's going to be willingness. What? Step 6. What? We're going deep.
Bye.
Bye.